Today, we're talking about revenue engines. What's a revenue engine? It is a tool for driving revenue in your business. We're going to talk about it and explain what it is. There's a new book that explains all about it. My guest today is Kara Smith Brown. I'll tell you more about her in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. And you know, if you've listened before, that each week I talk with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. Check out the archives. We've got Netflix, Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard. Lots of great episodes for you to check out. And of course, this episode brought to you by my company, Rise25, where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. You can learn all about our new platform, Podcast Copilot, by going to rise25.com or emailing us at support@rise25.com. All right, my guest here today is Kara Smith Brown. She's the CEO of LeadCoverage, which is a B2B marketing and sales enablement consultancy, and she began her career at a rocket ship, Echo Global Logistics, multi-billion-dollar company, before taking on other marketing leadership roles at other companies. And she founded LeadCoverage in 2017. And we'll talk all about that. And she has a new book out. It's called The Revenue Engine, which focuses on revenue generating strategies for B2B companies, that is just coming out as we speak right now. So I'm super excited about that. And I know Kara through participating in an entrepreneurs organization community called the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. Kara, happy to have you. So happy to have you here. I love chatting with you. And I love to ask people about what they were like as a kid. And you, of all people, I'm so shocked that I was like, what entrepreneurial ventures did you have as a kid? And she was like, nothing. Like, I didn't do anything. But you didn't do any. It's not that you didn't do anything. You actually were big into musical theater. Surprise, surprise.
Yes, I was not entrepreneurial. I was spending a lot of time on stages as a child. I'm from Chicago, and I was in basically Chicago Broadway as a child. I was yellow child number 12 in the rendition of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with Donny
That's a
Osmond.
critical role in that
I know,
performance.
yellowed.
Yeah,
I was
critical.
actually,
Yeah.
I was a vulture child. If you remember this show, there is Canaan Days. There are vultures on the stage. It was a very big job for me.
Yeah.
I got to hang out with Donnie backstage while I held a vulture. It was a big deal.
Donny
So
Osmond
yeah, I did
was
that
the
twice. It was a big
heart.
deal.
Wow, very cool. And are you like just trying to shiv like Yellow Child number 11 so that you can move up in the pecking order?
I think yellow child number 11 was like 5 and I was like 13 or something. So
Get out of here, kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kick them down the stairs.
So you're really into this, but then you had a kind of shocking conversation with a vocal coach at some point who got real with you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was ready. I was ready to go to, school and be the Broadway star. And my vocal coach told me, hey, you're too tall. I'm 6 feet tall. You can't dance, which is true. I cannot actually dance. And she said, all of the girls will be able to dance, and you don't care that much. And all of the men in theater are like 5'9" or shorter. So you're going to be too tall. You'll never be a leading lady. And you don't really want it that much. You have this kind of gift, this God-given gift to be able to, have perfect pitch and sing, but you don't really care that much. And she was absolutely right, John. Like,
well,
100%
hold on.
right.
But there must have been a moment where, like, were you in tears after she tells you this? Like, well,
oh, of course. I mean,
it
I
must have
spent
been
my
devastating.
entire life up to this point.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, 17 when she tells me this, but the whole 10 years leading up to that, I was the star of the show. I was the one on stage. I was that theater girl in high school. And for her to tell me like, hey, this is probably not the right path for you for your life. I think my parents were surprised that she was honest with me, and also relieved that I was not going to follow this path that was going to be kind of really, really hard. And
why? Because it's just so difficult.
Hard life. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So actually, there's a funny story. The woman that was my understudy in high school, she was always one step behind me. She could dance, but she couldn't sing. And she went to Broadway and did it. Like, she tried it and she failed spectacularly. And I saw her at our 10-year high school reunion and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how was it? I can't believe you did it. That's amazing. And she's like, but I failed. I'm like, right. But you had the balls to do it. Like you
Mm,
did it. And I never did it. And so it's one of those things like you always kind of wonder, like,
mm,
could you have done it? And maybe it has fueled a little bit of like not wanting to fail at other things.
yeah.
So I don't want to fail, right? At
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur, did an
Right.
Ironman, like I do like really hard things.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all stems back to someone telling me I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, which was be on stage.
I also think there's an element of sometimes we're drawn we find ourselves getting into things that we're naturally good at, and then we're also sometimes drawn into things that we're not naturally good at because there's more challenge involved. What are your thoughts on that? Because you said you naturally had a really beautiful singing voice.
Well, it's interesting. I think I've been getting on stages more often now that the book is out. I'm on stage a lot more. And having been a thespian and, at a super young age, I have an ability to be on stage and hold an audience, have stage presence and throw my voice across the room. And I think that may have always been there, right? And so now as an
Yeah.
adult, being able to use those
Now you're
skills.
utilizing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Again.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I did stand up for a minute. I've done, different sorts of
Done
comedy things
improv,
that are
right?
really fun. Improv before,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think it's all kind of culminating now in my 40s to like,
Yeah.
okay, now I did all this stuff as a kid. I did this comedy in college. You spend, 15 or 20 years kind of getting serious. And now it's really fun because I get to kind of put it all together and tell jokes on stage. And actually in the book, The Revenue Engine, which should have a copy on the way to you, there are three hilarious stories. The first is using, we call them silly names like Angel and Bambi, to get truck drivers to open emails, which works, by the way. Two is how I trapped my husband into marrying me. And three is how I got fired from being Girl Scout cookie mom. And I associate all three of these, like actually really funny stories, back to the revenue engine and how you use the funnel in marketing. So
Yeah.
it's fun. So being able to do all that and tell these silly stories and bring back those kind of thespian goals. But I think you're right. I think sometimes you lean into things that are easy.
Yeah, I mean, well, what I was going to say about you is that, you have a great personality. You use your personality, and I'm sure you've used it in the business in order to motivate your team, in order to open new accounts. You've embraced that. Use humor, you've used all those things, I'm sure. Like it's not like you're running a bank or something like that. Like the business that you have now actually allows you to utilize those skills that you've had for a long time and to take advantage of them.
It's really funny. The last job I got fired from, on the way out, they said to me, "We just think you're so fun. Like you're the best. But you can't work here anymore. Like we don't, we don't have a job for you. We don't really want you to work here,
Mm,
but we really think you're awesome." And I remember thinking to myself, like, I need to make my own sandbox. I need to
mm,
make a sandbox where I can be exactly who I am. And thank you for saying I have a great personality. There are many people in my wake who think I do not have a great personality.
yeah.
But it's okay. I can be polarizing. And I think as an entrepreneur, you've experienced this too. Like, I don't belong in someone else's sandbox. This
Yeah,
is a
for
lot of
sure.
energy to
Yeah.
have in someone else's sandbox.
Yeah.
And I get to kind of do whatever I want and be whoever I want, which is really, really fun. And I can be exactly who I am, which is really big, really bold, on stage, kind of like in your face. But it really has worked for us. So I appreciate that. Thank
I
you for
think
saying
that's why
that.
many of us find entrepreneurship is because we realize that we don't want to fit, square peg in a round hole type of situation in other companies. But you must have made it work for a little while because you ended up working your first, I guess, job after college was this company, Echo Global Logistics, now a multi-billion dollar company, but I believe it was a startup when you started working there. What was it like when you
Yeah,
first
it's
got
such a
that
good
job?
story. So Echo was started by the guys that started Groupon eventually, Eric Lipkowski and Brad Keywell. And I was hired before the CEO was hired. It was really fun in 2006. CEO's name is Doug Wagner. And I got hired 3 years later. Doug walked by and said, "Hey, you want to write an S1? We're going to go public." And I was like, "Yes, I will Google that and I will tell you what that is, and then I will tell you how long it will take me to do it. And he's
An
like, okay,
S1 is hundreds of pages long. It's a
yeah,
massive
yeah.
document. Yeah.
It's also like a financial document
Yeah.
for taking
Right.
a company
Right.
on the market to NASDAQ. I had no business doing this.
Yeah. Well, maybe
But
draft number one. Yeah.
well, there's a story
Yeah.
in it. Like if you ever seen the TV show about WeWork, like there's a story that you tell about how the business was founded
Yeah.
and what the market
Yeah.
is like. So this was my job, was to like craft this. I was the
Yeah.
marketer, was to craft the story. But it was really funny because I was like, I walked to Barnes and Noble at Clark and Halstead because I'm that old that it was still there. And I bought the book, Stock Investing for Dummies. And I went home that night and I read the book cover to cover. And I came in the next day and I was like, all right, I know all about the stock market. Let's go. And my boss was like, thanks for your enthusiasm. We have bankers. Like, you're going to be on the team, but thanks so much for wanting to be involved. So that was a great experience. My name is on the IPO press release from
Mm.
2009, which was super cool. And I got to be a part of that. They let me be a part of it. I'm super grateful. I got picked up out of there by a air freight forwarder, and then I went to another contract logistics company. So I've been in freight supply chain for most of my corporate career, and then ended up in Atlanta working for a garbage company, actual garbage, like trash. And when I exited that, I realized that I really wanted to sort of do my own thing. I had kind of started it when I had babies. And I learned the statistic that less than 2% of female founders will break $1 million in revenue. I was like, all
Wow.
right, hold
Wow.
my beer. So we
Yeah.
did it. Took us 8 months. We were really in and out really
Amazing.
fast. It took
Wow.
us 8 months, and we did it with an all-female team. So
Wow.
that was really fun. And then the next statistic is the number of women who break 10 million in revenue is statistically irrelevant. It is so small that
Mm.
it is just a list. They don't track it. So
Mm.
you can imagine the next goal. We're nearly there. It's pretty exciting.
Oh, that's exciting. Why? So we're getting back to, we were talking about kind of personalities and, fitting in other companies and stuff like that. Why do you think that you had a good run with that company, Echo Global Logistics?
Oh gosh. I was willing to do anything. I'm reading this book. I wish I could remember the name of it because it reminded me so much of myself. And Likeable Badass is the name of the book. And she talks about just being the girl that can get stuff done. And that was me. No one really knew what to do with me, but they really liked me. I had a lot of
Mm.
energy. I was training for an Ironman. I was like full of energy and piss and vinegar, and I was, in charge of culture, and I was willing to staple board books and do PowerPoint decks and kind of willing to do whatever it took to get the job done. And I think every company, specifically a startup, needs one of those. Everyone
Yeah.
needs just a gopher that can just get things done and go figure it out. I think the other thing that impressed those guys, and this was, gosh, like 25 years ago, was that I was just willing to kind of go figure it out. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say, oh, that's not my job, or I don't know how to do that. This was long before ChatGPT, but I was gonna figure out how to get it done, and they can
Right.
always count on me to at least like give it a try.
These kids today, I mean, geez, they just go run it through ChatGPT and then they got an S1 spits out in seconds, right? It's got it so
Yeah,
easy.
not
We
to,
had
I
to go to
mean,
Barnes and Noble.
we had to actually walk to Barnes and Noble and read things. We had to
I know.
like ingest information and then make
Yeah.
our own decisions. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a different world.
I want to ask some more about the personality piece because my father was a stand-up comic, and so I feel like I always have had an appreciation for humor. Wrote humor in high school and college and stuff like that. And I went into a very stuffy profession. I worked in government and politics. My first job after college was working in the Clinton White House. And I was around all these lawyers and I tried to be kind of stiff, kind of
Yeah,
serious and
that's
stuff like
not
that.
funny. There's nothing funny about government.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah. And it took me a while to embrace the aspects of my personality that were quirky and more, personable and stuff like that. And actually had a boss after that when I worked as a speechwriter in the California governor's office who had a law degree and yet was always joking with people, was always like, had his personality out. And it liberated me to realize, oh, okay, maybe that is a superpower. Like I should embrace my personality rather than suppressing it. Did you ever have like a realization like that, or did you ever go through a phase of suppressing your personality, or have you always kind of been in touch with who you are?
I have gone through phases where men always men, have asked me to suppress my personality for
And
sure.
yeah, what's that
Yeah.
like? What do they say?
The word they used in corporate America was filter. You need
Filter.
a filter.
Mm,
So we'd like you to have a better filter
mm,
because I am willing to call people out. I'm willing to hold people accountable. If you work for me, you're held accountable pretty regularly. Um, and that's not okay in some very specific corporate environments. I've worked for enormous companies, like humongous companies, where holding someone accountable in a room full of people isn't sort of the culture.
mm.
Um, and I am not good at politics. And like my husband, actually, he's a nuclear engineer by trade. He is so good at corporate politics, like knows who to talk to, when, how, who to take to lunch. Like he can kind of navigate those waters. I fail. I just fail. I have very low EQ. I can't really tell what's going on around me. And so yeah, I've been told more than once that I need to filter. And I finally just decided, like, I'm gonna stop having old white men tell me to have a filter, and
Right.
I'm just gonna start my own thing.
It's
And I
crazy because
think,
there's so many boring people in this world. And so for you to be born with this personality, right, that's vivacious and infectious and
thank
people are
you.
drawn to you, it's crazy for you to spend a career, even a portion of a career, in a place that wants you to suppress that superpower.
You know, it's so funny. I had not connected this until just now, so I thank you so much for saying it. Is I ended up in an industry that absolutely loves big personalities. I ended up in freight. I did not end up in banking. I didn't end up in government. I didn't end up in, healthcare. I mean, I ended
Right.
up and maybe this is why I love freight so much because freight really does let me be who I am and you can be kind of crazy and you can be kind of dumb and you can crush it in freight. So
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of crazy big personalities in the
Hmm.
space that I've chosen to be in and so maybe I'm just one of them. I'm just one of the big crazy personalities.
Right.
And so it's really interesting that you say that because I had never really connected the dots on why did I fall in love with supply chain and specifically freight so much. And I think it is because this is an industry that lets me be exactly who I am. Freight
Yeah.
brokers are the most aggressive, the most dynamic, the most challenged, the most competitive of any industry I've ever met. And I think being a woman in that space in supply chain, I have to do something to stand out. And so being sort of a type A aggressive woman has let me sort of rise to the top a little bit. And
Mm.
I think having a very specific point of view is also part of that, right? It's
Yeah.
not just that I'm an aggressive, loud woman, but I'm also like, this is very specifically what we believe, and I'm willing to put some math behind it.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were, after taking this company public, you had a series of jobs. You were fired from a couple of them. So setback along the way on the route to eventually starting your own company. What were those setbacks like, especially in comparison to that rough conversation you had with that vocal coach that was such a setback for you earlier in your life?
You know, every time you get fired or laid off, like it feels like the end of the world. And I have such empathy for people that I have had to let go in the business because I have been on the other side of it so many times. And I think every time it's happened to me, I have come out on the other side so much stronger and so much more aware that it just wasn't the right place. I used to think back in my 20s when I was going through careers and trying to figure out who I was going to be, everything, that when people said like that wasn't the right place for me, that it was like a cop out, like it was an excuse for not doing a good job or
Right.
it was an excuse for not being able to make it. And now I really do believe it. I do
Like, oh, they were
believe that
right.
you can,
It was the wrong place for
yeah,
me. Yeah.
that there
Right.
are places that are just not the right fit for some people. And
Yeah.
so, I've learned a ton. I also got like this personality, this amount of confidence, got me a little over my skis early in my 20s. I was in jobs that were too big for my skill set
Mm,
because I'm a great salesperson
mm,
and I
hmm.
just sold the hell out of myself. And I ended up in jobs and people were like, oh, you're going to go do the job now, right? And I was like, I'm not really sure what this job is, but right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'll figure it out.
yeah,
So it probably took me, the better part of 20 something years to figure out what that job should be.
right.
And then once I did, I literally wrote a book about it because I wanted the women who were coming up behind me, specifically in supply chain, but any B2B community where there's a marketing girl, right? There's just one girl who's doing marketing. I wanted her to have a playbook to say, hey, boss, this is what we're going to do. Like, this lady's pretty smart. We're going to follow this playbook. And then if we get half of this right, I think we're going to be good. And him to be like, okay, great. And
Yeah.
so it's taken a really long time to get here, but I'm really proud of how it's all kind of coming together at this moment.
So when you start your company, when you start a company, it can be very different from being an employee previously. Some ways it's better, some ways it's worse. You said you went to $1 million within 8 months, which is just insane. Why do you think that you were able to, get to that point in such a quick period of time?
I have pretty incredible cojones, and I asked for outrageous amounts of money from people.
Hmm.
And I still do it today.
Yeah.
I think I figured out how to use what I got,
Yeah.
and I ask for crazy amounts of money. Um, our average deal size is close to $1 million. We're a
Wow.
service provider. We don't do project work. We only do annual retainers. Our contracts have an automatic renew. So
Hmm.
they essentially, when you sign up with us, you sign up in perpetuity.
Hmm.
Um, we have really long-standing relationships with clients. They last a really long time. Like had clients that have been with us since day one. And I think going from 0 to 1 million that quickly was just having the balls to ask for enough to get me there in 8 months. And
Hmm.
the opposite way to ask that question is like, how do entrepreneurs that start out today take so long to get to $1 million?
Hmm.
And I think it's you have to really be able to ask for what you know you're worth and then be able to say no. And the hardest still today, I have a hard time saying no to companies that really want to work with us and they just can't afford us. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. Our minimum retainer is $30,000 a month.
Hmm.
And some people are like, we really want to work with you, but we can't do 30. And I'm like, let me know. Let me know when you can. Like
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
ready for you when you are, right?
Yeah.
Because we have other clients that pay us like 80 or 90. And so we got to free up the capital. We got the human capital. We got to free up the resources to make that work.
Did it take you a while to figure out what was the right team around you that would complement your skill set and that would like fulfill on all this work that you're generating? You do the sale and then, turn it over to the team. Did that take a while since you're running your own company at this point?
We're 9 years in and I'm still figuring that out. Like that, I don't know that ever,
Yeah.
I don't know any entrepreneur that's like, oh, I have the perfect team today. And this
Right.
very specific team is going to be the team that's with me in 5 years.
Yeah.
I will tell you that the team that was with me from 0 to 3 were wonderful women. There was an all-female team and I would not have been able to do it without them. And when they left, they literally broke my heart. Like I was so,
Mm-hmm.
so, so sad that they would not fit on the team that I have today. And
Mm-hmm.
so what got me from 0 to 3 is not what got me from 0 to 8 to almost 9, and it's not going to get me what's going to get from 9 to 20. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really hard lesson for some entrepreneurs to learn that these aren't your family.
Yeah.
This is
They're
not
not
your
your
spouse.
besties that are going to be there the whole time. Yeah.
No.
Particularly if because it's a totally different business at 20 as it is at 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're solving different problems and you need different skill sets. And if someone stays with you the whole time, like that's amazing, right? Like I have a woman who's been with me for 6 years, like since she was like 19, she's still with
Mm-hmm.
me and she is my ride or die. I think she's amazing. But her job has changed tremendously. The business
Mm-hmm.
has changed tremendously. And I think the hardest part for me, I don't know if this is for you too, the hardest part for me is for me to keep up with my personal growth as the business grows. Because the one thing that hasn't
Is you.
changed
Is
is
you.
me.
And you got it.
Yeah.
But you need to change, right? Like
I have to change. Like
right.
me, the human being hasn't
Right.
changed, but me as a human, I would
Right.
like to believe that I have changed, that I
Right.
have matured, that the way that I approach problems has changed, the way that I think about, and this is just almost 100% through what you and I are going through together, through the entrepreneurial master's program, through
Yeah.
learning. I'm going to a conference next week. We're just talking about it. Like the constant self-improvement has to happen because if me from 5 years ago were running this business today, it wouldn't work. It would fail.
Right. Let's talk about the book. So, you talked a little bit about why you wrote the book, but let's talk a little bit about what's in the book. You mentioned you've got a couple of stories in there, like your husband, the story about your husband, which you somehow relate to freight. Um,
Yeah.
let's go and get into the book a little bit.
Yeah, the book is, I'm super excited about. It's called The Revenue Engine, a B2B building a B2B high octane pipeline. And it's really a 9-step process. So we have a methodology, which is share good news, track interest, follow up. We have 3 funnels. So we split the funnel into 3. We have a prospect funnel, which are really strangers. The nurture funnel, which are folks who haven't paid you money yet, but you'd like them to. And then the customer funnel, which is cross-sell and upsell. And then most importantly to me, I wish it wasn't the last one, but it is how you measure. And we measure volume, velocity, and value. So we have a whole third of the book just on measurement inside the B2B engine, which I think is super cool. We have a whole chapter that was approved by Gartner. If your listeners aren't familiar, Gartner is a third-party research analyst firm. They're a really, really big deal in supply chain. So getting Gartner to give us a chapter on how to manage Gartner relationships or analyst relationships was really cool.
Hmm.
We have a chapter written all about ABM. We have a chapter on AI and what's coming, a chapter all about paid media. So it was really a work of many, many humans that came together to help with this book. And it's pretty well resourced and it's real. It's like a real book. It's 250 pages. It's not an ebook. It's
Yeah.
real. It's
Yeah. And share some of the humorous stories that you put inside of it.
Oh gosh. So the best one is how I got my husband to marry me, how I trapped him into marrying me. So I did an Ironman in 2009 and he told me we were dating at the time and he said, we will get engaged after the Ironman. So in my 26-year-old brain, I heard at the finish line of the Ironman, right? So I finished the Ironman and there's no ring. So I'm immediately disappointed. And 2 weeks later, I do an IPO. So now I've done an IPO. I have a great career. I own a house. I've done an Ironman. I am a 10 out of 10, John. This is how it equates to the funnel. Is my value on the Chicago dating scene is a 10 out of 10. And I work at a freight brokerage, which is full of 1,200 22-year-old boys, right? So if it's not him that wants to buy this 10 out of 10 package, it'll be someone else, right? So basically, I ride him real hard. And he's like, okay, we will get engaged. So I did what any girl would do, and I booked the church. And my and my parents' priest was like, congratulations. And I was like, we're not engaged. If it doesn't happen, you can keep the $100, but I booked the church. And so I got the receipt, the 8.5 and 11 piece of paper, and I put it on my refrigerator in the house that I owned. And I took all the magnets off the fridge. And he comes over one night and he says, hey, what is this on the refrigerator from the church? Like, this is weird. What is this? I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell you. I booked the church for my wedding. And he's like, what wedding? And I'm like, my wedding in 268 days. And he's like, wait, we're not engaged. I was like, you're right, but this is a 10 out of 10. And I am not waiting for you. So if it's not you, it's someone else. You decide. 2 weeks later, I had a ring. Yeah. But we talk about like the hard close, right? Like I had a hard close, best hard close of my life was, should I get off the pot, right? Like we're going to do this or not? And I think like dating in Chicago, the other thing that we talk a lot about in the book and how we equate it to the funnel is the opportunity cost of the other men that I dated in Chicago before I met my husband. And how disqualification is just as important as qualification in the marketing funnel. And the more you can disqualify a prospect before you waste time and energy trying to sell to them is just like dating in your 20s. I haven't dated in a really long time, so it may be different now with technology.
With the
but when I
apps
was
and all,
dating, when I was dating, you had to spend time with someone before you could disqualify them. So the idea that you have to spend time with someone to disqualify them and then really disqualifying them is a huge part of the sales and marketing process. So the book is super fun. It's got these kind of silly stories, lots of case studies around the same thing.
How did you tackle the chapter about AI, given how fast everything's changing in that area?
That is literally the first paragraph. It's like, listen, like this is written in 2024. We're doing what we can. I gave, I think, 4 or 5 different, like very specific pieces of technology that as of today, I think are the cool things happening AI. Understanding that the book will be dated in 6 months because it's AI. But in full transparency, Forbes, who published the book for me, told me I had to have a chapter on AI. I wasn't going to do it. It wasn't really my jam. But they were like, you really have to with this
Well,
day and
it's really
age. So
affecting your field as well, right?
for
Yeah.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
so we use Jasper. I think Crystal Knows, I think, is my favorite creepy tool. I love
Oh,
Crystal Knows.
interesting. I'm a big fan of that too. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
creepy. It's the best tool.
Tell for those who
So
don't know what that is, tell them what it is.
yeah, Crystal Knows is a psychographic profiling tool that
Hmm.
uses your activity on LinkedIn and Google to give a disc profile using nothing more than your login to LinkedIn. So I
Oh, that's
can look
interesting
at
that it does Google also. I thought it was just your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, LinkedIn and Google. So it can
Okay.
kind of get the anonymous, how many emails do you write? How fast do you type? That kind of thing. And so I can go to John at Lead Coverage,
Right.
or not Lead Coverage, John at LinkedIn, and I
Yeah.
can click on my Chrome extension and see your disc profile before we meet.
Yeah, it's
Which
fascinating because you know how to talk to them. Do I need to give them a lot of data or not a lot of data? Or are they going to take a long time to make a decision? Do they, all these different things.
It's wild. And I think that's only going to get more and more creepy as we have, because people just have so much data online and you can see it all. We spend a lot of time talking about intent data. We spend a ton of time talking about business to business intent data. And I think the idea of ABM or account-based marketing sort of as the halo words that we use around intent data is a really big piece of what's happening in B2B demand gen. I sit at a really interesting point, John. So I sit in between all the really cool tech that's happening in MarTech, EdTech, FinTech, right? All these cool SaaS companies and supply chain. And supply chain historically is not an early
Not
adopter,
as tech savvy. Right,
right?
right, right.
So I'm kind of the conduit. Like I get to bring
You're the
all
kind of
these
the
cool
magician,
tools.
like, oh, look at these little tools I have
Yeah,
for
I
you.
am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
and I got this big personality. So I,
yeah.
get on stage and I'm like, hey guys, like look at all these cool tools that your sales and marketing teams should be using. This is what the MarTech teams are using. This is what the go-to-market teams in FinTech are using. And let's give you guys like 10% of this because they can't handle a lot. But like,
Yeah.
here's a piece that makes sense for you. So I kind of distill what's happening in SaaS and I bring it back to the supply chain market. And it's been a really interesting niche for us because I think people really do appreciate it.
Did you learn that one through process of elimination? Like you said, you used maybe 10% of it. Did you try some cool tool with these clients and realize, oh, this is like way too advanced for them. It's scaring them, and I can't use this with these guys, even though it would be effective.
Yeah, I mean that's the real answer is yes.
Yeah,
They're pretty old school, right? Like
yeah.
the freight community in general is pretty old school. They like to make phone calls. I mean, literally some of these guys still use fax machines. You would not
So
believe it. I
so
had a
you
call.
yeah. Go ahead.
I had a call last week with a $3 billion company, and this is not a joke. A $3 billion company, and we're a HubSpot implementation shop too, like part of what we do. And we were talking about doing this HubSpot install. And this guy said to me, what are we going to do about the CSV uploads? And I looked him dead in the face and I said, well, we could,
Well,
pretend like it's 2024 and we could do an API instead. And I don't think he appreciated my joke, but like, who is doing CSV file uploads? Like, this is bananas. These people are so backwards. Like,
mm,
it's literally 1995. And so you can't introduce things like
mm,
Crystal Knows or Sixth
mm.
Sense psychographic profiling to someone who is literally using Excel spreadsheets and uploading CSV files.
So let me ask you this. So, if they struggle with the idea behind it, how do you sell it in a way that conveys its value? You've got these tools like these Crystal Knows that you want to use with these clients, but they're so slow to adopt these new technologies, and it's kind of frankly intimidating. So how do you charge the premium that you are without like scaring them off with the tools you're using?
Case studies.
Hmm.
Showing them their competitors or their compatriots or folks that are ahead of them in the market and the outsized impact that we can make with these tools.
Mm.
And then they say, okay, I want that. And I say, okay, I hear that you want that. There are 5 steps between where you are in the CSV file and where they are in the API, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get you there, but it's going to take a minute. And so we're very clear in how we do it. I think one of the things that I've learned is that the riches in the niches is so true for us. It's not true for everyone, but it is so true for us. The credibility that I bring when I talk to a freight broker or a freight forwarder or a freight tech company is outsized. And so part of the reason I can charge a premium is that I can tell them exactly what's working in our space, not what's working in marketing all over the place,
Yeah.
but what is working very specifically for the freight community and how does it impact carriers, brokers, shippers, warehouse providers, et cetera. And so that's really helpful for them to see that really commitment to the industry. They really appreciate that.
Mm. Kara, I know we're running a little low on time, and I love talking to you, but we'll wrap up with our gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who've helped you along the way, mentors, peers, contemporaries, that sort of thing. Who would you want to acknowledge?
I am so glad that you mentioned this question earlier because I have been thinking about it. And I think I'm so grateful for my girlfriend. Her name is Kristen Oja. And she's also an EO. She was in my forum for a long time, and she is on the same track with me. And I think when you find someone who is a compatriot in age, gender, size of business, career, right, et cetera, her husband also works with her in the business like mine does in mine. I think it's a really special relationship that you can have with someone because there's so much to share. And yeah, so I'm super grateful for Kristen. I think she's really special. She also runs a functional wellness company called Stat Wellness, STAT, and she gives me IV fluids when I need them, which is very helpful.
Like after a triathlon or something like that?
Yeah, after being really sick, you can give her send her a text and hop in and get a bag of IV fluids.
Yeah.
She's also just she's absolutely brilliant. I think there's something so fascinating, sexy, et cetera, about anyone, but specifically a woman who is so incredibly passionate about what they do every day, all day. And this is Kristen Oja. She had a functional wellness day. So it was a whole day in her space. And here she talked about, I'm not joking, John, that I am not exaggerating. She talked about the gut, as in the stomach and the digestive tract for 3 hours straight.
Wow.
And everyone was riveted. It was not boring. She is just incredible in her delivery. And so I think when you can find someone who's so similar to you like that, I think it's really special.
Kara, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and about the book?
Yeah, you can find me at LeadCoverage.com. I'm also all over LinkedIn. So you can find me at Kara Smith Brown on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Kara, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.